Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech. An iPhone 14 Pro Max has been out a little over 9 months. Last year it launched on September 16th, and I can't believe we're almost to the point where we're going to have a new iPhone in a few more months. So I thought I'd talk about the overall experience, battery health, durability, scratches, and much more. Now, battery health isn't that great. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first let's talk about durability. Typically, my main use case with this is not using it with a case. However, for most people, that's probably not the best idea. I personally want to durability test this just to see what it's like. I also like the way it feels when you're not using a case, and occasionally I'll use one. As far as the overall scratches on it, well, this is the space black version. You can see it picks up a ton of fingerprints, and I didn't wipe this off on purpose. You can see that here. As far as scratches, though, if we get up close, let me clean this off so we can see if there's any that are visible. I've wiped it off a few different times, and you can see here it's held up pretty well. There's not a bunch of scratches on it, not along the frame, but just touching it in general leaves smudges everywhere. So that's going to annoy a lot of people. As far as the frame, though, you can see here it's actually held up pretty well, but it's sort of down to the metal in some spots, and I typically just set it down on a table, pick it up. I'm very careful as to where I place it. As far as the camera lenses go, you can see here that the camera lenses don't have a single scratch on them, but around them it's actually worn some of the metal off. So you can see that here where just setting it down over and over, it's worn some of the paint off the metal or coating off it. As far as the display, it's held up pretty well, but you can see that scratch right here. It's a deep scratch in the display. There's not really many others. With the always on display, you're not going to notice it, but if I turn that off, then I turn off the display again, you'll see just that one scratch there, a couple nicks here on the left, and then as we go around it, you don't see too many, but there are a few here and there. What happened in particular, I'm not exactly sure, but the screen has been fairly durable overall. But in general, I would recommend a screen protector, as Ceramic Shield does a good job, but not as good of a job as having a case. And had I been using a case from today's sponsor, CaseCoo, none of this would have been likely. I wouldn't have any scratches on the outside edge, and probably the face of the phone wouldn't have them either, since this has a protective layer here where it sort of provides lay on the table protection. This is the CaseCoo CloudCush case, and CloudCush features air cushion technology with a full edge design to absorb shock if it's dropped. The case also protects the display like I showed you, and the cameras as well, so it protects that very nicely, and has a very smooth feel, but also adds grip as it has sort of a plasticky feel to it, but feels very durable. CaseCoo is offering a testing campaign where you can apply for a free sample for a limited time to review it for yourself on YouTube videos, social media posts, or text reviews on the Koo community. I'll leave a discount code in the description along with a link to the case so you can check it out yourself. Now, as far as battery health, that's one of the main areas this phone seems to have suffered. If we go into our settings, let me turn that always on display back on. Maybe this has something to do with it, but if we go back into battery health and charging, you'll see I'm down to 92% maximum capacity. This is the first time probably ever that I've used an iPhone since the battery health has been shown that it's gone below 100% at 9 months old. This has 223 cycles on it, as you can see here from Coconut Battery. And one thing to note is with the iPhone 13 Pro Max at 9 months, I only had 172 cycles. Now this is probably because I had to charge the iPhone 14 Pro Max much more than I did with iOS 16. So once iOS 16 came out with its betas, they just haven't been as good as in battery life overall, causing me to actually have to charge it. I've charged them the exact same both times. This just seems to go through battery much faster. Not just iOS 16 betas, but iOS 17 betas. It could have something to do with the processor getting hotter than the iPhone 13 Pro Max or something else, but having that many more cycles, 50 or so more cycles, is a lot more at this time of the year, where I wouldn't have expected it to go down this fast. Battery life in general has suffered as well. I've shown that as I've used betas regularly, but this is my best day I showed this last week. 6 hours and 24 minutes of screen active time and 3 hours and 38 minutes of screen idle time, with using about 75% of the battery. Typically, I'll only get about 4 to 5 hours. This has really suffered, and I'm not really sure what the difference is. It could be the always on display, but typically when I charge this, I'll use a MagSafe charger or a Qi wireless charger, and I'll charge it all night. I'll use optimized battery health and charge it the same way as the other phone, the 12 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max, all the way back to the first iPhone. I've charged them all night long, put them on my nightstand. When I'm in the car, it would be charging using either CarPlay or just charging on a wireless charger. So no differences there. I haven't used it any different, but for whatever reason, it's degraded the battery health more than any phone I've ever seen. One great thing about iPhone 14 Pro Max is its display. Not only does it have the great viewing angles iPhones are known for, it also is incredibly bright, especially outside. It can go up to a peak of 2000 nits of brightness for limited time, depending on the overall heat of the device. So there's no issue seeing it outside. It's 1600 nits in HDR, and again, looks amazing. However, it also doesn't bother my eyes with PWM, or pulse width modulation, how it controls brightness. It's flashing the display faster or slower to control that brightness like other OLED displays. However, above about 39% brightness, it doesn't do that. It seems to switch to sort of a DC dimming mode or a super fast flashing where you can't see it at all with your eyes. You can't typically, but even if you're bothered by it, it shouldn't bother most people. 1 in 10 is affected by it, including myself, where it could cause me eye strain and cause me to feel nauseated. But with this display, it just doesn't happen. Apple improved it with the 11 Pro Max, again with the 12 Pro Max. 13 Pro Max was great, but now with 14 Pro Max, it seems to have fixed the issue for most people. So this is much better than it was before. Also, we have the always-on display this year. It goes down to 1 Hertz, so it saves battery. And then with iOS 17, you'll have that new feature with standby mode. So that does come to older phones, but when they're charging and you put them in horizontal or landscape mode, shut off the display, it goes into this standby mode. So let me try that again. You kind of have to hold it still here. There we go. And then you can swipe through different clock options and more. So you have different options here if you want to change that, go through photos and more. So that's something that's great, especially with always on display. Now the cameras have been a bit of an improvement this year, but also a bit of controversy, as they seem to overprocess the photos and video, but also improved the sensor. We have a 48 megapixel sensor, and it takes good photos and videos, and I've used it for different videos on this channel. But it seems to overprocess the HDR and also just seems to oversaturate or over-sharpen everything in the image. So it's pretty good in general. The front-facing camera is a big improvement with its autofocus, but the rear cameras seem to be updated a little bit with iOS 17 more recently. So they seem to be providing a better image, less sharpened, less saturated, and hopefully it improves with the next generation or just software in general. They definitely could fix it. As far as the speakers go, they've held up pretty well. They're not really rattling or anything like that. They seem to have held up well over the past 9 months or so, so no issues there. And reception, though, is hit or miss. So I'm using T-Mobile and I have 5G coverage. Let me turn off the Wi-Fi here. You'll see it's 5G, sometimes faster versions, sometimes slower versions, but in general, the coverage is okay. I really don't have issues with the coverage so much as it just sort of dropping randomly. Now, I do run a lot of betas. That could cause some of it, but I'm hearing this from people on regular versions as well. So you could be on Wi-Fi, then you switch to your mobile data connection, back to Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi will drop, then sometimes your data connection will drop. And I think Apple's working on this for future iPhones where they want to replace the modems from Qualcomm with their own modems. We had an issue with Intel modems, we've had issues with Qualcomm, so hopefully they're going to remedy that in the future. But it definitely could be better. As far as iOS 16 goes, well, that's been one of the buggiest versions we've seen in a very long time. We have everything from the notification bug that's well known, where it just sort of disappears, and then sometimes it works properly, then other times it just doesn't. This should be fixed in the future, but at this point it seems to still be a problem for some reason. iOS 17 still has that issue, and hopefully they fix it, and that's more of a stability update. But iOS 16 has been one of the worst we've heard in years. We thought that'd be iOS 15, but iOS 16 made it even worse. So hopefully it gets much, much better. At this point, I don't think it could get much worse. I think it is improving, but for years to come, this will be supported as far as the iPhone 14 goes, but iOS 16 was just not great. So I do expect this to be supported probably all the way till iOS 2020, 21, something along those lines, where it's 5 years old, maybe 6 years old, and then it will stop getting the major updates. But Apple supports their phones very well, and we can expect support for many, many years to come. So there's not much more to talk about as far as the iPhone 14 Pro Max. It's holding up well. It could be a little bit better, and hopefully iPhone 15 or 15 Pro Max fixes this. If you're wondering if you should wait and buy an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, I probably would say at this point, 3 months out, definitely wait. As far as the iPhone 14 Pro Max, if you can get this at a discount, maybe free from your carrier, then you may want to do that. However, I wouldn't buy it right now at full price if you're on a previous iPhone. At this point, it doesn't make sense. Just wait a few more months and we'll have the next version out. Let me know your experience with iPhone 14 Pro or 14 Pro Max in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.